that's important to reiterate. The next step, as you're getting started in investing, is setting goals, is thinking about what the purpose is for the money that you are setting aside in your investments. Because I believe that investing just for the sake of investing makes it harder to make decisions. So, and when I talk about setting goals, it's thinking about those important milestones in your life that you want to accomplish out into the future, 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 or more years from now that you want to accomplish in your life that's going to require some financial resources. It could be a goal of sending a child to college. It could be a goal of successfully retiring. It could be a goal of philanthropy. You want to set aside some money to be able to use that in a charitable way. But thinking about the goals, the financial goals that you have for those investments is extremely important. So, and that also helps you set up your time frame and then the type of investments that you might make as you're doing that. So does that make sense, Steve? Thinking about this process that we want to lead the audience through, emphasizing that a first step in investing is setting goals. Does that make sense? Does that bring any thoughts to what you've been thinking about as we've prepared for the show?
Oh, absolutely. You've made it crystal clear. In other words, people have to know what they want. And there's a million analogies about starting out on a trip and just not having a map. You end up, you're making good mileage today. I did 9 hours of driving today. I covered 500 miles today. Yeah, but I went in the wrong direction. So you've got to have a roadmap. Of course you do. No, that's very good the way you laid that out.
So the second thing that I think is important to think about is diversification. And diversification just means, in a very simple way, spreading your risk out among different investments as you invest. There's a real temptation, I think, especially in the world today where the stock market is at an all-time high. It's been running rampant for about 10 years. And, people think, you can't miss when it comes to buying a stock. Say, well, gosh, look at what, Apple's done or one of those high-flying stocks, Google or something like that. So I'm just going to throw my money at one of those companies because it's been going up over and over again. And that's how I will successfully invest. I will pick the one stock, the one investment that's going to do the best. And the truth is that things don't go up indefinitely. Individual investments in companies or in commodities, they always have their ups and downs. There are cycles. There's a cycle to everything. And so when someone is getting started in investing, I think the most important thing that you can do is figure out a way to spread your risk so that you aren't taking unnecessary risk with those few assets, those few investments that you have to get started. And diversification is really easy these days because there are a lot of pooled investments that you can invest in. The simplest and probably the best one for most people getting started is a mutual fund. A mutual fund will allow you to invest in a certain type of investments or multiple types of investments and spread your risk among a bunch of different companies so that if you're wrong, and maybe that investment fund owns Apple, so you own a little piece of Apple. You're participating if Apple does well. But if Apple doesn't do well, there are other things around it to support it. So I think diversification is key. Thinking about a pool of assets, using a mutual fund that lets you focus on goals that spreads risk in a substantial way is a way to take some of the ups and downs out of your investments. I don't think it's until you get to the point where you feel like all of your goals are fully funded, based on projections that you make for those goals and how well those investments should do, that it makes sense to speculate. But there's such a temptation, again, especially in this environment, to not focus on goals, not think about the risk of owning single investments in single companies because things have done so well, And I can't tell you how many times I've seen people's big goals set back or completely wiped out because they took unnecessary risks. They didn't diversify their portfolio. And when I think about diversification, I think about it being in a very simple way between three different classes of investments. There are stocks, which have the highest returns over time, but the biggest ups and downs. Bonds, which and stocks, some people say kind of think about stocks as being that thing that will return 8 to 10% on average over the years. Bonds are next. Bonds might return 4 or 5% on average over the years, and then cash, those cash-like investments, savings and CDs and stuff like that, which is like 1 or 2%. So you're thinking, well, how do I combine my higher earning assets with my medium returning assets with my lower returning assets in a way that really gives me the kind of diversification and safety that I can sleep well at night, that I don't have to worry about my investments going up and down. So diversification and thinking about where you allocate your investments becomes a really critical rule. And there's a lot more that we could go into there. And maybe, Steve, you'll have some questions in a minute, but let me just kind of finish kind of the last of my 6 steps that I outlined in this process, and that is invest consistently. So when you set those goals, when you start to invest in that diversified portfolio, you choose the right mutual fund or mutual funds to invest in to meet your goals, then set up a plan to make sure that you're investing into that investment vehicle on a consistent basis. There's a term called dollar cost averaging, which is a great way to think about it. And that's just simply saying, if I have $100 a month that I can set aside to work towards one of my financial goals, and I know what fund it's going to go into, do it every month, because some months the value of that investment may be higher and you'll buy less of it, but other months it might be lower and you'll buy more of it. So over time, you're averaging the cost of what you're investing in, which again kind of takes out some of the risks, some of the ups and downs of that, and ensures that you are not trying to time things. I only want to buy when it's low. I don't want to buy when it's high, because that's impossible to predict consistently over long periods of time. You're doing it consistently. And when you're doing things consistently in a way that allows you to work towards your goals, that is extremely important. So, do your savings, have your cash, have the money for your next big goal, get rid of your debt, set clear goals, diversify, and then invest consistently. Those would be the rules or the steps that I would, and the advice that I would give if I was sitting across the table from, one of the folks in the institutions that you're talking about, who's really seriously ready to take the next step with their money.
That's an excellent primer foundation to get started. I took the title of the show off of the cover of your book on the ultimate client, delivering the ultimate client experience, and I see it's on your shelf behind you. But investing, the path to less stress, more income, and greater personal freedom. I think that what I want to stress here is what you said. A little bit of savings that can be converted to investing once your savings is secure over a long period of time will grow into a lot. And we all know people that it's not enough return. I'd just rather spend my money on something else. I don't want to save right now, or I don't want to invest. But I've got a friend that did dollar cost averaging for maybe 30 years. And he's got a couple $1 million right now. And he was just as disciplined as anyone I ever know. And now he's retired and he's got all of his investments working for him. So could you just give a quick overview to motivate people on why they ought to start now? I mean, you're given the great way to do it, consistent, disciplined, et cetera. But, why should people start sooner than later?
Well, it's again, common sense and simple. Going back to that Einstein quote, the longer you do it, the more money that you'll have. And your example, Steve, of your friend who just never made a lot of money, set aside a couple of $100 a month in a dollar cost average account and ended up with a couple of $1 million, happens over and over and over again. And we don't hear a lot about that because it's not sexy. It's not, I made $1 million overnight. It's I made $2 million over 30 years. But just $100 a month applied towards an important goal can get you there. If you need, $100,000 for a college fund for one of your grandkids who's going to go to college in 20 years, just putting aside $100 a month can get them to that point because of the way that those investments and returns compound. So it might seem, well, gosh, I really can't help. I'd love to be able to, help with my granddaughter's college education. That's one of my goals. But, all I could really afford is $50 a month, and that's really not going to do a whole lot of difference. So I'm just going to go ahead and spend that $50 a month buying my granddaughter cute outfits. Well, those cute outfits, she'll outgrow them. But that $50 a month could end up in 20 years being $50,000. I don't have a compound interest calculator here now, but that happens, and I've seen it happen all of the time. Your story, Steve, reminded me of a conversation I had last week with one of my clients who's a financial advisor. We were talking about some of the best investors we had ever met, and he said the person that inspired him to be a successful financial advisor was one of his uncles, who never had a job that paid a whole lot more than minimum wage. But no matter what happened, he saved every month. And over a course of a 30 or 40 year career, he ended up accumulating $2 million. And he was wealthier than other relatives who were on the surface a whole lot more successful, made a whole lot more money. But Casey is the guy that I'm talking about. His uncle just took advantage of his situation. He knew that the way that he was going to be able to have financial freedom, to have less stress, those things that you mentioned are part of my the way that I've framed my book is when you're doing those things regularly, you have less stress. They create greater freedom. So he just went about doing that month after month, year after year. And now he's in an incredible financial position just by being consistent with it. So it could be $50 a month. It could be $10 a month. It could be $200 a month. It really doesn't matter. It's just that consistency and the way that compounds and grows. I forget what the exact quote is, but they say that one of the greatest wonders of the world after deserts and oceans and stuff is the power of compound interest, the power of your money, making money day after day because you've put it away and you're consistently working towards one of your goals.
I got a great quote that it really shows that. A man named Paul Samuelson. Investing should be more like watching paint dry or watching grass grow. If you want excitement, take $800 and go to Vegas. Then he says, if you think investing is gambling, you're doing it wrong. The work involved requires planning and patience. However, the gains you see over time are indeed exciting. When I was a paper boy, when I was 14, 15, 16 years old, I saved $5 a week. And I bought my first car. And it was nice having a car when I was in high school. A lot of people needed rides, and I was the guy that had a car. But, you can achieve a lot of goals if you don't waste your money. And I'll just give one more and then turn it back to you here. Dave Ramsey, he's a guru in what we do here. Financial peace isn't the acquisition of stuff. It's learning to live on less than you make so that you can give money back and have money to invest. You can't win until you do this. It's just being disciplined and prudent and being focused, et cetera. So, hey, you're doing great. Keep going.
So I think that quote from Dave Ramsey is a good one to kind of play off of right here, because, when you are in a position where you have, where you're being paid and you have expenses, in a way, the people that you have to pay for